Last year, we did our Pikmin series marathon, where I reviewed every game in the Pikmin franchise. But something else I thought about doing during this process was to play some Pikmin likes from other developers to see how they stack up to Nintendo's original, either by improving on it or doing something different with it. Unfortunately, there aren't really any Pikmin likes out there. Pikmin is rather unique in the sense that it has very little competition in what it does. But there was one game I had heard about that did seem to be trying to take the concept of Pikmin, commanding a team of little guys to collect objects and travel the environment, and do something a little different with it. That game is Tinykin, an indie game by the developers at Splash Team and published by Tiny Build. Tinykin follows very similar beats to Pikmin. We have a human-like protagonist from outer space who travels to a mysterious planet and somewhat fails the descent into said planet, leaving them stuck in an unfamiliar land that looks like our Earth, except everything is massive, at least from our hero's perspective. Then Milo, the name of our hero, meets a unique race of tiny inhabitants called the Tinykin, who come in a variety of colours, each with their own unique abilities, and has to use these to build a contraption that will help him escape the planet and return home. You can see the similarities between Tinykin and Pikmin, and I'm pretty confident that the developers did this on purpose. Throughout Tinykin, I was shown time and time again that the developers wear their inspiration on their sleeves, with lots of fun little references across all the NPCs, like a secret switch in a game corner behind a poster guarded by someone called Rocket, or two NPCs named Jack and Rose, who are in love but come from different class backgrounds that keep them apart. Jack can't swim, so he needs a board to stay afloat, and Rose gets drawn like one of Jack's French girls. Many of these are pretty adorable references where if you know, you know. But that's really a minor part of the game, to be honest. I just wanted to mention it somewhere because I thought it was funny. Despite these similarities in story setup and concept Pikmin, that's where the connection ends, because Pikmin is a strategy game, while Tinykin is very clearly a 3D collectathon platformer. Milo isn't as agile as most platforming mascots. He can jump, he has a bar of soap that he uses to skid across the ground and grind on rails, and has a bubble that he can use to glide across long gaps, but that's the end of his movement capabilities. But the game's levels and objectives are structured like a hybrid of Banjo-Kazooie and Pikmin. Players run around a level and collect nectar, which functions similar to both the notes and jiggies from Banjo-Kazooie, where there is a specific amount scattered about in each level, some just laying around to be picked up and others to be given as a reward for completing objectives, like delivering mail or opening a waterfall. These can then be used to upgrade the length of the bubble glide, making navigation easier. Sometimes from objectives you might receive a collectible artifact instead, which then gets added to the museum in the hub world, a tried and true collectible. Every level usually has one core object that the player needs to get in order to rebuild their spaceship, but in order to get that object they need to do several sub-tasks for the various insect NPCs throughout the house, which more often than not involve carrying a specific object from one location to another using your Tinykins, clearing out any obstacles blocking their path, and opening up faster routes for the player to scale vertically in a space. Tinykin is a very vertical game, often forcing the player through platforming challenges on their first run through, before opening up shortcuts like grind rails and ropes to make escalating faster. I really like the theming of the levels in this game. Each stage is a different room of a typical household. There's a living room, a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, a hallway, and a greenhouse, and I think it's very clever how the artists of this game use lighting and everyday objects to simulate very different feeling environments. A giant flower in the middle of a room with sciencey equipment and observation tanks gives the locals a vibe of explorers and researchers camping out in this room and studying the secrets of their world, while all the toys in a child's bedroom might have been used to create a fairground with attractions and exciting events. My favourite is the bathroom though, where massive stacks of toilet paper are piled on top of one another to simulate the feeling of being in a big city. It's very well done. In fact, the presentation of Tinykin is one of its strongest aspects. You can see from the visuals the sort of faux 2D style the game is going for, something like Paper Mario, and I really enjoy it. Couple this with the attention to detail in the environment, like having all these little rooms for the insects to live in that can change theming depending on the room you're in, it's all very nice and memorable. Another collectible are the Tinykins themselves. They don't come from room to room, meaning every level requires you to build up your army once more. They come in 5 colours. Pink is your typical Pikmin-esque dude that can carry things and push objects many times their size. Red Tinykin explode when they hit an object and you never get them back. They are dead now. But you need them to be in order to break open crates or barriers, so they are dying for a good cause. Green Tinykin can stack on top of each other to create a ladder for the player to climb, aiding in the player's vertical reach, and then you have the blue and yellow Tinykin, which are very context sensitive. The blue ones conduct electricity and are used to fix broken electrical wires that power on devices, while the yellow ones create bridges, but only in specific locations. They are far less versatile than Pikmin are, and essentially just function as ammo for the player, who needs them to solve every puzzle the game has. There's no combat in Tinykin. It is an entirely puzzle-centric game that mostly requires good observation skills to identify what object your Tinykin needs to interact with in order to advance. However, that doesn't mean there isn't challenge, especially if you're going for 100%, as some of the platforming can get quite hard, and the races that you unlock after clearing a level are borderline unfair in the times you need to hit. Thankfully, you only need to get a gold medal on each to unlock new costumes for Milo to wear, but there is a platinum medal you can go for, and honestly, I don't think it's worth it. It's been a while since I've experienced true gamer rage while playing a video game, but the races in Tinykin brought it out in me, and that's because it really highlights where the flaws of this game lie. The game is a 3D platformer, and so many of the issues that plague that genre, like the camera and an issue with the depth perception, are also problems here. The bigger annoyance, however, is that the few options Milo does have for his movement capabilities are inconsistent, in ways that they really shouldn't be when the player is tasked with doing very precise platforming under a time limit. Take grinding for example. In order to pull it off, the player has to either jump or slide onto a rail or the edge of a platform, and Milo will snap to it and grind in the direction the player was facing. However, the game is incredibly precise with the angle you need to hit an edge with in order for the game to decide Milo should be grinding instead of just falling, and in the heat of the race, trying to hit that precise position is really tough. But it's required just to get the gold medal, let alone the platinum one. But maybe you could just say that it's a skill issue and my own problem, and while I disagree, I can see why you might claim that. Something that is 100% a problem with the game though, is the input for gliding. When you go from standstill, the game asks you to press the jump button twice, once to jump and then again to glide. This on its own is fine, but the problem comes in when you are off the ground already in any way. You could be grinding on a ladder of Tinykins, bouncing off a trampoline, basically anything other than just having Milo's feet touch the ground. In this case, you only have to press the jump button once and then hold it down to glide, rather than need to press it a second time. Because of how often the player will be going back and forth between jumping from the ground and jumping from anything else, it can be easy to mess up which input you should be doing in that moment, which will either lead to the player not gliding at all or cancelling their glide and having to restart it, after Milo has already dropped a few feet and now doesn't have the height to make the platform you're reaching towards. Then when you take this issue and add it into the context of a very fast and precise platforming race, you can see how one slip up can ruin everything, and it feels very unfair to the player. It's a weird decision and it makes Tinykin far more frustrating than it really should be. And that is a shame, because otherwise Tinykin is a really fun game, especially if you are a fan of collectathon titles. There is a risk of the game getting a little samey, as the resets in your Tinykin count and the lack of new moves Milo can learn does mean that every level essentially starts from scratch. Thankfully, I don't think the game overstays its welcome, and the presentation was always a treat for the eyes. At worst, it's a nice game to play just to wind down the day, and that doesn't sound at all like a bad time to me, as long as you don't do any of the races. I want to thank Super Rare Games for sending me a copy of this game to review. It looks like the release of its physical has gone well. And I want to thank all of you for watching this video. Let me know if you played Tinykin, if you had any interest in it or had never heard of it before. I also want to thank all of our patrons. The $5 plus tier is on screen right now. If you like our content, don't forget to like and subscribe so that you'll always remember to return to the source.